All right, and we are live. So, welcome everybody to day 4 of Wisconsin Salt Awareness Week. I'm so excited to have you joining me today. We have Juan Lopez from Helen Brand Water, who's going to talk about how you can optimize your water softeners and make them as efficient as possible for salt use. And Matt Meyer is here from EnviroSealers. He's going to speak about ways to conserve salt around your home and business during that winter maintenance season. So before I hand it over to Matt, I do want to give a big SaltWise shout out today to all the citizen science monitors who are working around the state of Wisconsin to kind of test chloride concentrations in those freshwater streams and lakes that we all love so much. So you'll get to see a little bit more about what they're up to if you join in tomorrow for our video of our success stories in 2020. But today I will pass it over now to Matt.
All right, thank you, Allison. Can you see my screen?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, all right, great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Meyer with EnviroSealers, LLC. First, I'd like to express my gratitude to each of you and Allison Madison of SaltWise for giving me the opportunity to share this information with you today. A little history about our company. We started with painting parking lot lines. And as we entered the industry, we recognized there was a need for more environmentally conscious contractors in the asphalt maintenance section, specifically seal coating. So our initial goal was simple. If we put down more products than our competitors, less pollutants will get into the water table. So EnviroSealers was born. We've now expanded into snow removal, and we are a certified SaltWise contractor. Okay, there we go. All right. So my hope today is to inform you and give you the resources to take action. And our mantra will be each one, teach one. So alternatives to salt. What's available out there? There are plenty of blends available. You can find them at most of your home centers. However, what's interesting to me is that there's no claim or there's no requirement for the claim. So I encourage each of you to do your independent research as you are considering products to be putting down. I've heard of beet juice, cheese brines, pickle brines, or even fertilizer. And I really love the outside of the box thinking on these. However, as you do a little bit more research, what we've come to find out is these have microorganisms in them, and they compete for that food and oxygen supply against other microorganisms or fish that are in our water systems, and then ultimately also contribute to the growth of algae. You can see on our slide, I have magnesium chloride, and that does scaling on concrete. What scaling is if you break up, if you see kind of that flaking or scaling on the concrete, over time, it erodes the surface of the concrete and does damage to the concrete itself. Calcium chloride's in my research, what I've found, that does a good job. So right there, that's a good alternative. Be aware of the price points on that and whatever makes most sense for you. Some of the more organic choices that you can see here, we have coffee grounds, wood ash, and sand. The coffee grounds and the wood ash, it's a little bit more because they're darker and it helps melt the snow that way. The wood ash has some chemical reactions in there that also help melt the snow. Sand, I caution you to be aware of the sediment, but then there's also salt brine. Salt brine is a salt and water solution that works, is effective, or even more effective, I should say, than just salt alone, using less material. All right, so in the comments, if you'd like to let me know, what are some of the tools that you folks utilize? And the biggest emphasis I'd like to make here is that a new tool is often more effective than an old worn out tool. So that sharper surface on a shovel or ice chisel may just make enough difference for you to decide to go ahead and utilize that tool and leaves less residual snow for cleanup after the fact, where salt is typically more needed. All right, embrace the suck. So I'm going back a little bit to my military history here. What do I mean by embrace the suck? So you're gonna actually just go out and clear your snow, right? I recommend a pre-treatment with brine. I have listed here a half gallon to 1,000 square feet. Most average homeowners, I would say, have around 1,000 square feet, some a little more, some a little less, when you take in the driveway surface and sidewalk surface that you're responsible for. A rule in our house is you never drive on fresh snow in the driveway, right? So this avoids compaction. Another key thing for evaluating how much salt you might want to be using is taking a look at the extended forecast. If temperatures are going to be on the rise, I would encourage you to hold off on utilizing the salt. That sun alone might be enough to clear away the surface. If you treat with brine and you want to do a post-treatment, again, depending on temperatures, that number does increase, but usually a pre-treatment for brine will greatly reduce the amount of salt or brine even needed after the fact. If you do use salt, we encourage you to, that 1 granule per every 3 inches, so don't get it too close. So a coffee cup, they say, will do like 10 sidewalk squares. If you do decide to put salt down and you notice that after the salt is needed, there's still some residual, you're encouraged to clean that up. Sand as well, put that down for a little bit of traction if you need to, but again, we want to get that material off of the surface areas, as this will eventually lead to more problems creating sediment in the sewer systems. All right, so what I'm hoping is that each of you feels empowered that you can make a difference. We're asking you to decide that you're going to help reduce salt. And if 58 homeowners decide that they're going to start making some changes, that's really the size of a football field if we're talking 1,000 square foot each. Again, each one teach one. Please feel free to share what you've learned, not only in this class, but throughout the whole week if you've been a participant for the whole week. We ask that you fail forward, right? Don't be afraid to try new things. We're trying to make progress here. So if you fail, don't fail by sitting on the couch doing nothing. Fail by trying to be proactive. And again, Semper Gumby, this isn't going to be comfortable for everyone. So I ask that you use some flexibility in your growth as you continue to make changes in how we reduce the use of salt. Our company, EnviroSealers, has put together some residential salt brine kits for those of you that might be interested. The kits do include a sprayer, some brine, a funnel to get it from a 5-gallon bucket into the sprayer a little bit easier, and then some low temperature additives. And again, this also feeds into what is a bigger concept for us at Enviro Sealers, and that's a co-op agreement trying to get more contractors and homeowners to feel empowered to take action, take the right steps, and overall reducing our salt. So if there are any questions, feel free to please reach out to me directly on one of our mediums there, either by cell phone, text, email. You can shoot me an email or reach out to us on Facebook. Thank you for your time, and here's to clean water. And I won't take any more of Juan's time. So Juan, thank you. Everyone, thank you.
Matt, that was great. Thank you so much. And I'll join in the toast here.
Or if your water's a little bit more of the brown and coffee flavored, toast as well.
All right, Juan, do you want to take it away?
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Allison, for having me on there. Matt, great coverage there. It's always good to pass on information on things that I don't think people research into enough. So nice job there.
Thanks.
Let me move this. All right. My name is Juan. I've been in the water treatment industry for 17 years here at Hillenbrand. I'm very happy to be a part of this event. I started working on the floor, receiving in products, and now I have the pleasure of running the retail operation in the only Wanakee in the world. Because of my movement throughout the company, I've actually experienced customer interactions on all levels. And what I find interesting about the water industry is that it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. You always have something to learn. Today, we're going to be talking about putting your house on a low salt diet in regards to your water softener. Diets are something we can all relate to this time of year. I actually really like that people make a point to start the year on a high note and challenge themselves. So let's start this year off right and make a difference. It's been a great week so far. I actually personally watched all the presentations this week, and again, it doesn't matter how long I've been in the industry, I always learn something, and I did this week as well. But this week allows us to bring awareness to things affecting our environment. It allows us to connect direct with communities. It's such a great opportunity to learn about the problems and, more importantly, the solutions. Salt Week creates an opportunity for us to work together and make an impact. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we need each other in more ways than we ever thought before. So big kudos to Allison for leading this event. In order to understand why we're here, I think we need to reflect on why we are having these conversations about softeners and chloride discharge. We have some of the hardest water in the country. And that is why we need equipment to reduce calcium from the water. We ultimately care about the way our appliances look and operate. We want our appliances to last as long as possible and work the way that they're designed. We want to use the least amount of detergents, shampoo, conditioners, and have our products work effectively. We want to get out of the shower and feel silky smooth and clean, not dry and itchy. I get calls all the time from customers saying they had a bad hair day just to realize that their softener's not working. But the funny thing is I usually get the call from the husband and now it's an emergency. So of course I bail them out. We spend money on different finishes for our fixtures, stainless steel, brushed nickel, and we want them to be bright and stick out. We purchase high-end coffee machines to help us keep up with this fast-paced world we live in, and we want them to last longer than a year. People have spent the most time ever in the kitchens last year, perfecting recipes to bring to family gatherings once we're able to do that. But we don't want our pots and pans to have a white film on them when we're finished. These are the things that we expect and want maintained. But in order to do that, we have to reduce out the minerals such as calcium and iron from the water. The most common and effective way to achieve that goal is a water softener. Common question I answer on a regular basis is, how does my softener work? I could certainly answer that very in depth, but I like to keep it simple. And softeners are very simple at their core. We use a media called resin, and just through basic chemistry, the resin attracts calcium, manganese, and iron. And it actually takes no electronics or salt to actually reduce the minerals out of the water. If I was to pour resin into my hand and then pour water into my hand, all the water that would fall out would be what we call soft water or calcium-free water. The trick is resin can only do so much of that before it needs to be regenerated. That's where the control valve and the salt come into play. The control valve tells us when the resin needs to be regenerated, and depending on how old or what technology you use, this could be based on time, which basically means it is preset to run every so many days. This process can also be set to happen based on your water usage. If you use X amount of gallons, the regeneration will be triggered. You can also use a combination of time and water to determine when the system needs to go through regeneration. We then use the salt to regenerate the resin. The process we use is ionic exchange, and it is exactly what it says. We swap one ion for another, calcium and sodium. Through this process, the softener does send some sodium and chloride to the drain and releases a trace amount of sodium to your own water supply as you use the water for things like showers, laundry, washing dishes. And when I mean trace amount, I mean pretty much the same as a slice of white bread. As my family and friends know, I usually take a very neutral stance on life. So addressing the flip side is something that I love to do when we're having conversations, and they'll talk to me and I say, but, or have you thought about this? Same thing rings true for softeners. They also have a flip side. And one of the biggest topics is chloride discharge from softeners. And I did have a large segment added in this, but after watching the segment on Monday by Hillary and Bill, if you don't know exactly what chloride discharge is, please circle back and watch. They did an amazing job explaining that very in depth. But simply put, when salt is added to the water, it breaks down into sodium and chloride. Chlorides end up in the water treatment plants and eventually make their way to our fresh water. At high concentrated levels, can be harmful to fish and plant life. Pretty sure it was Bill who used an example of how high concentrated levels affected the growth of rainbow trout in a test that they ran. So again, refer back to that video. It's a great example. But another downside to softeners is having to haul salt. Doesn't matter how old or young you are, this can be a daunting task depending on the path you have to take to get to your softener. And every home is different, some more challenging paths than others. If your softener is located right below a bedroom, or if you have a bedroom on the lower level, you can hear the water running when it goes into regeneration. The regeneration cycle does use water, generally between 30 to 70 gallons each time. If it's an older, non-efficient system, this can be a problem because it uses the higher amounts. It's not all gloom and doom, though. There are many things you can do as a homeowner or business owner to make an impact. Optimization is the starting point. Optimization is taking your existing system and making it as efficient as possible. And this is in regards, when we talk about efficiency, we're talking about salt and water usage. So get a trusted professional and take a look. The key though, like I always tell people, you got to ask the right questions to make sure that you're going down the correct path. Ask them if your softener is capable of going longer between regenerations. If you have a softener that runs off of time, they can test the water, do a fixture count, check the salting level, and determine what the best setting is so you don't run out of soft water. If your softener runs off of water usage, ask them if there's a way to allow more water between regenerations. Again, they can test the water, do a fixture count, take into account the new averages we use today, and look at the salting level to determine the best setting for you, again, without letting you run out of soft water. When I first started here, we used about 70 to 100 gallons of water per person. That's what we factored our formula at. Because of more efficient appliances and people in general just being more aware and educated, this has gone down. People care about their water. Now it's more like 40 to 60 for an active person, gallons of water used per day, and 20 to 40 for a less active person. Ask the trusted professional if they can lower the salting level. In some cases, we can do this. But if it causes the system to have to regenerate more often, then we got to weigh our options. When you lower the salting level, that impacts how well the resin can reduce out the minerals. But again, being the start, if everyone optimizes their softener, I believe we can impact the chloride discharge needle and help flatten it out. Why don't we just optimize everything and be done with it? That's a great question. Sounds like an easy answer. I would love for this to be the solution. However, not every softener can be optimized to the level that we need. When you consider how water profiles have changed, the limitations we have with older water softeners because of the technology used, and the fact that resin wears down at about 1 to 3% a year, you are fighting an uphill battle. For example, every 5 years, your water softener is in service. It needs to regenerate at least 10% more often to account for the resin that's wearing down, depending on the quality of resin used up front. For a standard optimization, we would shoot for at least 10 to 25% increase in efficiency. But that is 100% dependent on the age and type of softener you have. Again, a great start, but to get where we need to be, we need to shoot for more like 50% reduction in salt usage. And water goes hand in hand with that. In order to hit those numbers, we have to look to new technology. If you look at the basic premise of cars and computers, the concept of cars hasn't changed. You hop in a car and you drive. You turn on a computer and you browse away. But cars have gotten better on gas mileage. Computers have gotten faster and take up less space. This is all through the use of new technology. Softeners are very similar in that way. Although the basic chemistry of softeners has never changed, we use things like Vortec tanks to use less water each time it goes through regeneration. We use less parts in the control valve to help quiet the noise as much as possible. We now track your water usage patterns and use real-time data to determine when the system needs to regenerate. We use higher quality resin to get you longer lifespans out of your equipment. Through upflow technology, we're using less salt each time we regenerate, while maintaining similar lengths of time between regenerations. We have made twin tanks systems more affordable so that homeowners can take advantage of 24-hour coverage and even longer times between regenerations. Sometimes new technology can be scary, but at some point, as a whole, we need to embrace it because new softeners can lower your salt and water usage by 50%, and in some instances higher. If we just take a quick glance at how the math on salt usage can swing quickly in any direction, based on what we do as a community, you can see 1 house versus 10 houses versus 100, how the numbers grow immensely. And if we start talking about knocking that 25%, 50%, there's some significant impacts. Businesses, are going to use significantly higher numbers This is based off of 15-plus-year-old softener, mechanically metered equipment that generally uses about 60 pounds of salt a month. So that's a lot. That's what's out there. That's the most common system that's out there in the market right now that we see. So every time we swap one of these out, we're moving in the right direction. And even getting in there and optimizing these, we're moving in the right direction. And the end result are actually different conversations. A lot of times I used to get calls on, it's just using too much salt. I really need a salt delivery program. Or now we get calls that says, it's not using salt, something's not right. And that's just because we're used to using a lot of salt. It doesn't mean it's right. And a lot of times I mail out a test strip, they test the water and the water tests perfectly soft. And they're thankful. They're like, wow, I didn't think I could make that much of a gain in just a residential home. So that's what we're doing on a daily basis. I always like to say I want to change the world one softener at a time. And that's true because we are reducing and helping the environment. So, put some thought into that when you're making decisions. I also love the saying, I play chess while everyone else is playing checkers. This holds very true to the topic that we talked about today. Think many years ahead. Don't think about today. Don't play checkers. If we all play chess and we think about how all of our purchases impact us in the future, we're going to make a difference. And that holds true on salting your sidewalks, no different than our water softeners. So thank you for tuning in and participating in Salt Week. I hope that you take at least one nugget from each presentation, and even more than that, I hope that this information is helpful. I hope that you realize that anybody that's talked this week cares, that we want to talk with you, we want to answer questions, and we want to work together. So on that note, back to you, Allison.
Thank you so much, Juan. Thank you both. And I just wanted to put out there one fact that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of. Juan is really driven, like you said, to change that, our world one softener at a time, because he knows that all that salt that we put into our softeners ends up being discharged. Wastewater treatment plants cannot remove salt from our wastewater. Those tiny little sodium and chloride ions, once they're dissolved in water, are almost impossible to remove, as you've heard in some of the earlier presentations. So since that's not an option, what we can do as homeowners, business owners, is to work to reduce the amount of salt that we're putting in those softeners, have very efficient systems. So with that, I'm going to read some of the questions that have come in here. So it looks like our first one is from Lance Green. Can we connect these two issues, so winter maintenance softeners, to perhaps use salt twice? I've heard that some larger softener operations reuse their brine for ice control. Can we do that at home by capturing the recharge water?
You want me to take this one, Matt? I can, yes. So we do have systems that can capture the wastewater and reuse it. But then it becomes gray water, so we can't actually use it for everything. But I do think that based on, again, I'm learning a lot today, based on some of the information that Matt provided, where he's using some sort of brine to pre-salt, I think there are opportunities here. I think there are opportunities to take that water, because it does have a salt content to it, and reuse it on your sidewalks. So yes, I 100% think that's a great comment, great question. It takes collaboration. It would be somebody like Matt sitting down with us and saying, how can we work together and, provide an affordable solution? Because a lot of times that's what it comes down to. It's not that we can't do it. It's just sometimes the cost to do it or the real-time application isn't practical.
Yeah, I would add in there that we are seeing softener brine reclamation. So people reclaiming the wastewater from water softeners and using that as a de-icing brine, or sorry, anti-icing brine like Matt is using. Water softener discharge is going to have the calcium and the magnesium that we've worked to remove, as well as the chloride, which is what we're really trying to keep out of water. And that solution, the calcium, magnesium, and chloride, can be used as a de-icer. There isn't a lot of information out there on homeowners taking and using that. And I think it's a little trickier to use brine than it is just to throw down rock salt. And so it hasn't been something that Saltwise has done a lot of promotion of, but we have seen a number of individuals in the Madison area start to use that. So around the Lucky building at UW-Madison campus, there are some school districts that are starting to recapture and use their softener brine. And then also the US Forest Service down at the Forest Products Lab is working on this as well. I don't know, Matt, if you want to add in anything.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, and I think it's a great, I love the question because it's like, gets the wheels spinning and moving in the right direction. So when you apply a salt brine, you want that concentration to be 23.3%. So that's really the magic number. So your discharge is going to be far less than that. So you are going to have to supplement your discharge water with additional salt to bring that solution up to that 23.3%. But yeah, great question, and absolutely, it's going in the right direction.
All right, thank you both. Our next question comes in from, looks like Jane Peterson. If using rock salt, would it be better to preemptively salt before forecasted snow, rain, mix overnight if you're expecting ice conditions, or would you wait to see if ice forms? So preemptively use salt, like rock salt, or wait?
Yeah, so again, I would say that if it were me, I probably would not pre-treat with the rock salt. I would be leaning more toward the salt brine. If brining's not an option for you, depending on what the forecast is going to be doing, then you may pre-treat with the rock salt. But again, there are a lot of factors to consider. Is it going to be a little bit of rain, a freezing rain? If so, I honestly wouldn't put anything down because it's just going to get washed out, and that's just more contaminants into the water table. If it's going to just like be fairly nice, like the potential event today, where we will be getting an event today. Today was a perfect day to put brine down. And if you pre-salt a parking lot or your own surface, that's okay. But I think it'd be better to just either pre-treat with brine or shovel.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Matt. We'd really prefer to not put that rock salt down ahead of time in case it would just move off with rain, or maybe not be needed if it doesn't snow. We know those weather forecasters aren't 100% correct. So there's just a lot of potential there for extra salt being discharged into our lake streams and drinking water. Next question, I can keep myself unmuted. Looks like Jane has another one. It's a tough one when weighing the public safety concern against potential salt washing away with rain. So Matt, do you want to talk at all about, how do we weigh public safety and salt use? Can we reduce salt use and still maintain public safety? What's your experience been?
Yeah, so I'm glad this point was brought up. A good friend of mine is, a lawyer, and I asked him the same question. And he's not only just a lawyer, but he specifically specializes in like slip and fall claims. And the Saltwise community, there's a application guideline on there. And if you follow those application guidelines, and quite honestly, you're the homeowner, so it's not as likely that you'll be documenting your processes as contractors would be. However, it's my understanding that as long as you're doing something, you're protected. It's if you have a do nothing approach, that you're susceptible to potential lawsuits out there for slip and falls. But I would say that, you know, if you're following the application guidelines and you could prove that, then, you know, the courts would decide, but more than likely you're going to be fine. It's just if you're doing a do nothing approach that leaves you more susceptible.
All right. And I did have my supervisor has messaged me as we've been talking and said that we really want to get the message out there that we should not salt, as I said beforehand. Don't put rock salt down before it snows. And if you do that, it's likely that when you're shoveling, you're just going to be shoveling that salt, you know, onto your grass with the snow.
Matt, on pre-salting with rock salt, that doesn't cause pitting in the concrete or anything like that. I thought there was some of those issues too.
Yeah, well, salt is corrosive, right? So there is some of that issue as well with the concrete, asphalt. You know, it's anytime you can eliminate. I mean, it's just corrosive, you know, and it breaks everything down. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But I agree, and I'm glad you mentioned that, and your boss chimed in, Allison. You know, that's why it's you know, in my opinion, a pre-treat with that salt brine, it's like using a cooking spray. That's what I've heard it compared to. And it's a cooking spray and you fry an egg, right? You're gonna have less residual in the pan after the fact. So, you know, your labor's less, and ultimately the hope is less salt.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for using that analogy, Matt. It's what we're trying to do with the brine is prevent that bond from forming between the snow and the pavement. Just like that oil or that little, you know, little bit of cooking spray on the pan. But rock salt is more like, you know, dumping a pound of butter onto your pan. We don't want that in our food. And if you have all that rock salt down, you know, it might just be melting whatever comes down. So it's not work. Rock salt doesn't work quite the same way as brine does as an anti-icer. Looks like we have a couple more questions coming in. Juan, I think this one is geared to you. Lance Green has asked, where can we buy test strips to monitor our softeners?
Good question. They're actually really available. You can go to Home Depot, Menards, and purchase different type of water testing equipment there. Here at Hellenbrand, we do offer a free service of water testing. So you can bring in a water sample. If you're testing for hardness, we can test right there on the spot. I just like to be very clear though, if you know what you're testing for, are you testing to see what your raw water is, or are you testing to see if your softener is working? Because if you're looking to test if your softener is working, bring in a sample from the bathroom hot water, not the kitchen cold, because generally that doesn't run through the softener. And if you are on well water and you want a further analysis of your water, bring in a raw water sample. Takes us 1 to 3 days, and we do a full analysis for you.
Thank you, Juan. And I'm really glad that you brought up that point about testing water that should be softened, like the bathroom hot water, right? A lot of us are used to that softened water for our hair, for the showers, lathering up. But like our kitchen water, especially that cold tap water, it shouldn't be softened. So if you are interested in testing to make sure you're only softening the water that we need to soften, not the kitchen, not the toilets. You definitely don't want to be softening your hose water and, you know, salting your yard and your plants. You can actually get test strips for free to do that. So that's testing water hardness. And those you can get from Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District. I'll put the link in the chat for those test strips. But like Juan said, you want to make sure you know what are you testing for. All right, our next question comes from Jan. She said, I'm 77 and grew up with only sand being used on roads. It left a mess of sand along the city streets. Do any towns still simply use sand today?
I can respond to that. I think a lot of people are trying to use a salt sand mix. I know a couple years ago there was a huge salt shortage, for salting because we had a really heavy winter. So it really depends on how much snow we get, depending on which resources they use. But I think they're starting to be cognizant of the salt effects on the environment. And they're also cognizant about when they leave sand, how, you know, much sediment that leaves behind as well. So I think they're doing their best to provide us the safety that we expect on the roads. And they're trying to limit what they use as best they can. But here in Wisconsin, Madison, the roads get really bad. So, you know, right now we need something.
I would add in there for Jan and everybody that one thing that, you know, those winter maintenance professionals know, not all homeowners are aware of, is that salt, while a very powerful tool, stops working around 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So when temperatures dip down to those really cold temps, I should say below freezing, but it's well below freezing, salt doesn't work anymore. So that's a lot of times why we see sand coming out when it's really cold. Sand can be used for traction. It's not going to melt ice, but it can provide that traction that we need for public safety on top of ice or, you know, unbare pavement. So we really do encourage everybody to shovel first, as Matt said, get that snow up, and then scatter, use just the amount of salt you need. And then third is switch. If it's too cold, switch from salt to sand because the salt's not going to work anyway. All right. Those are all our questions for now. I'm going to just hang on here for a little bit longer because we have a delay between our voices that we're hearing, Juan and Matt, and then our audience. But as I wait, I just want to say thank you again so much for your time today. Thank you for preparing for this and all the work that you've done that has brought us to this point. You are both experts in this field and obviously very dedicated to the cause here of protecting our freshwater resources in Wisconsin. And as Representative Saltwise, I really thank you for that and look forward to continue to work with both of you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Allison.
All right, I think we can tune out for now, but enjoy the rest of Salt Awareness Week.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Peace.